Hello, everyone. Still gathering some uh, people coming in soon, so just waiting for a little bit. Feel free to stay relaxed, and we'll be starting here in the next few minutes. Just wondering if everyone can hear me okay. Maybe a quick thumbs up in the chat. Oh, try to see. Right. I think the chat is enabled now. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay, thumbs up. Okay, so we got 12:01. Definitely want to respect everyone's time for who's in here. So we'll go ahead and get things started. So hello everyone, and welcome to the Expert Insights Navigating Polarizing Conversations at Work. My name is Eric Dormo, and I'll be your host for today. This webinar is brought to you all by the Institute for Professional Development at Metro State University. Here at the Institute for Professional Development, we deliver customized professional development for employers and individuals in business architecture, public sector, supervision, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other leadership topics. As a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded and available on our website in the next coming weeks. Just wanted to do a quick run through of all that we offer at the Institute for Professional Development. While our expert insights, blogs, and customized training have been around for a while, we have newly added digital badges and graduate credit. We have also added design thinking training or human-centered design. All right, so now we will get into the main event for today, navigating polarizing conversations at work. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. As for my role, I'm currently the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Specialist with Metro State University's Institute for Professional Development. I'm originally from the Twin Cities in Minnesota and haven't left. My background is in higher education, where I gained experience in advising, career development, mentorship, and leadership training. In my current role, I've given workshops on topics such as multi-generational differences in the workplace, cultural humility, diversity, equity, and inclusion essentials, and building personal brands. So I'm excited to bring all these insights to you all today. So here's the agenda for today's workshop. We'll start with, understanding polarizing conversations. Then we'll discuss strategies for navigating polarizing conversations. To go a little bit more into depth, we'll address how to manage conversations when they become escalated. Then we'll get into some key takeaways, closing, and talk about what's next. Today's workshop is meant to be engaging and interactive, so I encourage you all to chime in and add your perspectives or questions as we move along. We'll be using the chat, we'll be using the poll function. There'll also be some time just for some Q&A as well. So you can take a look at when you're on the Zoom, you should be able to access those buttons towards the bottom of the screen. So there's some key things to think about as we move forward. I'll do my best to be monitoring the chat while also driving today. So please bear with me as we as we navigate that. All right, so before we begin today's presentation, let's start with an icebreaker. I want you all to think of a topic that always sparks a debate, whether that's having pineapple on a pizza, Vikings or versus Packers, team cat or team dog. Drop your answer in the chat. Again, thinking about topics that always sparks debate. So I'll get some time for you all to add in the chat there. Yeah, Kim says politics, definitely. Qdoba versus Chipotle. That's a good one. Pickles is either love or hate. That's a fair point. I personally love pickles, and my wife hates pickles, so that's true, Kayla. Hot dog or hamburger. Maybe I'll read off a few more. Is a hot dog a sandwich? I've heard of that one too. Let's see. Any more good ones? Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I just wanted to, pique everyone's minds as we're going into this conversation. So to set the tone for today, I wanted to read a quote from author Mary Frances Winters, who wrote the book We Can't Talk About That at Work. So in the book, she says, politics, religion, race. We can't talk about topics like these at work, right? But in fact, these conversations are happening all the time, either in real life or virtually. And if they aren't handled effectively, they can become more polarizing and divisive, impacting productivity, engagement, retention, teamwork, and even employee sense of safety in the workplace. So let's begin with part one, understanding polarizing conversations. So here we'll discuss some of the dynamics and key factors of polarizing conversations in the workplace. So as we may know, polarizing conversations are defined as a discussion between people who have opposing views or beliefs on a topic. As some mentioned earlier, some common polarizing topics may be politics, or maybe social issues, could even be personal values. If we think of current events, we can all remember, how many polarizing conversations took place around our last election or even recent executive orders. So we do see that polarizing conversations are all around us. So just speaking to the reality of polarizing conversations, when we look at some of the statistics, according to Gardner Research, they found that 36% of U.S. employees pretty much reported that the topic of the 2020 presidential election led them to avoid talking to or working with a coworker because of political beliefs. According to Harvard Business Review, in 2021, they did a survey with about 656 employees, and nearly 60% described disagreements at work as moderately, moderately, very, or extremely unpleasant. So as we can see, polarizing conversations are real. They're in the workplace. They're happening, and it's something that is something that we truly have to evaluate and have an understanding of as it's happening. With or without those conversations being talked about directly. We have to make sure that we do understand just the realistic approach of this. So now I wanted to have you all just input on this. I created a poll. I'm going to activate the poll now. Make sure that works. Okay. So again, these will be anonymous, but I wanted you all to just list some examples of topics that tend to polarize conversations in your workplace. Some examples might be management decisions, could be generational differences, etc. You can submit all these anonymously again using our poll feature at the bottom of your screen. And once we get some responses, I'll be able to just share, just so we can compare or maybe even see, um, get a gauge of what's out there. So I'll give you all some time to do that. We're at about 42%. Do a little bit more time. Be able to brainstorm on there. We're about 57%, 61%, 65%. Appreciate all the engagement. 70%. Let's get some time for a few more if those want to share. Again, these are all anonymous. We'll go ahead and hit the end poll, sharing results. Can everyone see the results on their end? Let's see my answer. Okay, sorry about that. Let me go into here. Sorry about that. Let me see here. Let me get some access to the results here. Sorry about that, everyone. Having a little bit of difficulty on getting that on the screen, but I can just read out some answers. Management and admin decisions, decisions without the involvement or discussions that may impact workload of personnel, people who are dominant speakers in conversations, Um, President's initiatives, what the motive is behind decisions of local board of directors. See some other ones are politics, wages, management's favoritism of an employee, old school thought process. So yeah, definitely some good answers here. And yeah, sorry I wasn't able to show these on the larger screen. But yeah, definitely seeing a lot of similarities here on different polarizing topics. Get back to my screen. Okay. So yeah, appreciate you all sharing those. And just to give my own personal example as well, I remember being in an organization-wide meeting, and during this meeting, we were talking about the return to office. Again, this was during the pandemic. All work had gone remote, and within this meeting, there was the topic of mandated COVID-19 vaccinations as we all may have also experienced. And within this meeting, it was brought up in the sense that there would be a vaccination requirement to come to the office. From my experience, this proved to be a polarizing topic, as there was within the meeting, there was pushback, and ultimately this led to the departure of colleagues. So this is definitely an example that maybe a lot of us had to manage as well, or just something that was yeah, it was a real polarizing topic during that time and potentially still is, but I can definitely understand how with sometimes not having the right processes in place, that when you don't handle some of these polarizing topics in the right way, it can lead to burnout, to departure of colleagues, to lack of retention. So definitely want to name that as we think about how these polarizing topics are brought up or even handled. So why do conversations become polarizing? There are a variety of factors within this. The first is confirmation bias. We people tend to seek out and trust information that supports what they already believe, while maybe ignoring or rejecting anything that contradicts it. Sometimes there's the us versus them mentality. Once we start to, or once we or others identify too strongly with the group, whether it's political, ideological, or even social, our brain might treat those opposing views like a personal attack. Um, or that's another way that people might be thinking about it. There's the emotional reasoning side of things. So instead of valuing facts objectively, we let our feelings dictate what we accept as true. So sometimes the stronger the emotions, the harder it is to listen to opposing arguments. When you add in social media algorithms, all these factors get magnified. Depending on who you follow, it might be a space where we're only seeing voices similar to our own, or vice versa. And sometimes just from different stories, right? There might be some sort of like clickbait shared without reading the article first. So there's a lot of different factors when we think about even how social media amplifies these, all these areas of factors for polarization. Um, I know that for myself, I think just in the recent times, there's just so many different articles out there. It's hard to know what to trust. So I think there's just a lot of key factors as what we're seeing to why conversations are becoming so polarizing. So now that we know, what causes conversations to be polarizing, I want us to discover some strategies to be able to address these conversations. I recently listened to a podcast and they mentioned how organizations need to build containers that can hold heat. What they meant by this is that building that organization to a way where the organizations can handle different opinions, but also have that aspect of safety, right? Um, because as we know, the polarization is real, and there needs to be some effective ways to navigate these to make sure that we're having this safe space and having constructive dialogue. So now we'll go into some of those key strategies. So our first strategy is to listen empathetically. It's all about being present in the moment, not worrying about how you would respond or what arguments you would present. Some major components of empathetic listening include active listening, right, where we're using good body language, we're giving verbal cues to convey interest. There might be some reflective responding where you might paraphrase or summarize what the other person is saying to ensure that we truly understand what they mean. So this can be using phrases like, let me make sure I've got this right, or if I understand correctly, this is what you're trying to say. The key driver in this is showing empathy, which involves, truly tuning into someone else's emotions and experiences and imagining yourself in their shoes. Nonverbal signals also play like a pivotal role that ties everything together so that, other thoughts or expressions are being heard and received. So that's with good eye contact and just making the other person feel seem that or making them feel that they can express their opinion. So what does empathetic listening sound like? If you're wanting to validate others, you might say, what you're feeling is totally valid. That's one that I try to use. I'm trying to come to understanding, even in my personal life, when people are expressing things to me. Again, when you're trying to portray that reflective listening, you might say, so in other words, what you're trying to say is, and trying to again let that person know that you are hearing them as they're expressing themselves. To encourage the person to share more, you might say something like, I'm here to listen, I want to understand, taking that time, just expressing that you're there to hear them out. And again, to show empathy, you might say something like, it sounds like you're dealing with a lot. So again, there's just different ways to have that empathetic listening as you are trying to navigate these polarizing conversations to a way that's civil and that, in general, we're just showing that empathy holistically. So when navigating polarizing conversations, another key strategy is to lead with curiosity and not judgment. I remember there was a time where I was at dinner with friends and we were discussing a polarizing topic. Typically, with the closeness, and I'd go back and forth with my group of friends. And there was one time though where instead of going back and forth, one of my friends made a comment, and I just paused and said, "Okay, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that?" When I did this, not only did this diffuse the situation, but I was able to truly learn about my friend's viewpoint without looking to judge or change their mind. We still had those opposing views, but I was able to learn more about where my friend was coming from. And this leads to another point that's important to have friends or colleagues across different viewpoints so that you might have those go-to friends where you can, get a perspective to learn more about opposing views other than your own. So I think that's where, leading with these curious questions, maybe it can help to enhance that network, um, to again maybe get a viewpoint with someone that you trust that maybe in a various on another side of the aisle, right? When you're thinking about navigating some of these polarizing topics and conversations. So when you are engaging in dialogue on a polarizing topic or in a polarizing conversation, it's important to express your feelings without sounding accusatory, using those I statements, right? So for example, say you've had a history of debate with a colleague who seems to always oppose anyone's recommendations about some things. Like using new technology in the workplace, for example. You might say, I feel concerned when others are not being heard, instead of saying, you always negate what other people have to say. So again, I think just a reframing of our language can also help just to diffuse, but also be able to just use that statement to kind of define how you're feeling instead of making this an appearance of an attack, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of different ways to use that, but that's something that I found as I was even preparing for this webinar, but also just using this in my own personal life as well. So sometimes there are obvious signs that a colleague or someone has opposing views, but I think it's also important to be mindful, right, of making assumptions that colleagues that you're close with, may have that same viewpoint. Um, we have to understand that even though you might be close, it doesn't mean that you feel exactly the same way on every polarizing topic. In action, right, this can look like not bringing others into a polarized conversation without them knowing or assuming that everyone will agree on the stance that you might have. Again, this can just open the door to curiosity and understanding the importance on diversity of thought. So again, just being mindful of those general assumptions and really trying to lean into that curiosity as we're having these discussions with colleagues or just with people around us as well. So lastly, we can try to find common ground. You know, we all understand how polarizing we are as a nation right now, and sometimes it does feel impossible to engage with others with differing views. Um, in the essence of the workplace, though, this can be a hindrance for productivity. So how can we find common ground? One of the main ways is to identify areas of agreement before addressing those differences. So this can be within shared goals when you're looking at overarching company values. Um, there's different ways to find that common place, and then maybe there's different ways to get to that solution or to converse. But I think it's understanding that okay, here is our team or company value, and are we sticking to that while we're having this conversation, or are we aligning with that? So, for example, there may be a polarizing conversation about, moving a team into a different office space or not. I know for our team, we've moved a few different times, but when you think about what the overarching goals are with that polarizing topic, this is where an agreement can be had, or just trying to understand the main goal or objective, right? So, try to find that common place of agreement, and with that, being able to know that, okay, while we might have different opinions or different thoughts, here is the main goal that we're trying to reach and trying to do a dance between how can we find that common ground and also just find different solutions, right? So that we are experience that difference of thought and being able to come together on a solution. So I want to go through a scenario with you all. Imagine you're in the middle of an important meeting, and what started as a casual difference of opinion has escalated. Voices are being raised, body language has shifted, and the energy of the room has taken a sharp turn. In this section, we'll explore key situations where de-escalation skills come into play and just try to talk through effective techniques that can help you to keep calm and carry along. So when we think about just those signs of escalation, right? Looking for, verbal aggression. So this can be within yourself or within others, whether there's that increase of volume in a person's voice, if you're starting to see the use of personal attacks, and this can be signals of a person's feelings rising, and then also that frustration and that anger. So I think it's something to be mindful of as you're in conversation, to look out for and to be sure that to try to check your own escalation, but also in those that you might be conversing with. Within that aspect, there's those nonverbal cues. So that could be, physical signs such as, clenched fist or aggressive posture or rapid, heavy breathing, right? This can be another sign of escalation. And lastly, right, we never want to feel disrespected. And, a common factor of escalation can be that perception of being disrespected or undervalued. So there's just three things to look out for while having these conversations, whether it's a one-on-one or in a meeting environment. So if you see any of these three aspects, let's talk about some different techniques, right, that we can try. First one is setting boundaries around language and tone. In situations where conversations become too heated or unprofessional, being able to gently set boundaries around respectful language can prevent that further escalation. Um, clearly but calmly reminding the individuals of the importance of keeping the conversation respectful. If a team discussion, gets into disruptive language, trying to say things like, let's keep this conversation constructive, trying to reframe the point. I know in my own personal life, when having some tough conversations, I try to, keep that gauge of, where volume's going, and I try to reel it back in to be able to say like, okay, I'm noticing this. Um, let's take it, either take a break or get back to a little bit more of a calm tone and watching the language. So this is something to think about. And that leads into the pause and reset, right? Sometimes the best option is to take a brief pause. These polarizing topics can be very emotional. When emotion's really high, facts might not work. So pausing the conversation and coming back after a short break can give everyone a time to cool down and reflect. So in a tense meeting or conversation, that could look like suggesting a 5-minute break, saying let's take a quick break to regroup and coming back with fresh perspective. So yeah, don't be afraid to have that pause, or even in a one-on-one, just noticing and saying, I think we should pause and come back. Sometimes employees or your colleagues need time to process their own thoughts. So offering a space for follow-up can relieve that immediate tension, providing them with an opportunity to express themselves in a more composed setting. So again, say it's a one-on-one conversation or a team meeting, or maybe everyone that's seen a recent email that came out is, I think, in terms of offering like, hey, we know that, this conversation was a lot. Let's come back tomorrow and try to get some fresh perspective on the situation. So that's another key way to think about de-escalation as well. Then lastly, again, sometimes the best way to de-escalate is to directly acknowledge the emotions at play. So recognizing and validating the feelings expressed without immediately offering opinions. So it could be, as a third party or in that one-to-one interaction, say you're seeing some of those cues of escalation, or even seeing how someone reacted to something and coming in and saying, hey, I noticed this happened when this was said. Just want to check on you and make sure you're okay. So really, showing that empathy and, not dismissing those emotions that do come up. Whether that's, as if you're going, back and forth with someone, or, just trying to have that respectful bound within the conversation, but also showing that empathy as well. So now that we talked through some different strategies and de-escalation techniques. Overall, to build that culture of trust and safety when handling polarizing conversations, I just wanted to name some steps that your organization can think about taking. I think the first thing is understanding the challenge. When challenges occur around polarizing conversations, it's important to understand the impact of the challenge and the consequences of what happens if the organization addresses it, and what happens if they don't. So again, this goes back to the fact that polarizing conversations are happening, they're showing up. And as an organization or as a team, really being able to understand what that polarizing topic might be, or if you're hearing different chatter, I think really trying to get an understanding of what's going on. The second one is, guiding the discussion, right? If you're a part of leadership or you're just passionate about helping your organization to navigate these different polarizing discussions, I think having that notion of guiding and really trying to align, towards that company culture, where you're thinking about the discussions that are being had. The third one of setting boundaries, it could be helpful to set boundaries for some conversations. So whether that's you're having a set meeting, utilizing employee resource groups, you can think about what platforms these conversations take place. Is it a dedicated Slack or Teams channel? Um, it might be important to think about that. I know another organization that I'm a part of, we have a space um, where we call it a blue room, right? So this is a space where if there's any polarizing conversations or discourse that needs to be had, any disagreements, this is the space to kind of hash those things out. This is a personal example, but again, just trying to set a boundary or a place. And I think also being mindful of, what actions are taking place. Um, One example I saw was that there was a team member that had brought in pamphlets to their office on a topic that was polarizing around personal values. This might be something to be mindful of, as again, there might not be similar personal values across everyone on your team. So again, just being mindful of what things are, having those boundaries, right, within your organizational culture. And the last piece is taking action, right? So we talked about, the understanding the challenge, guiding the discussion, setting boundaries. That third one would be, taking action. Being honest about where your organization is around facing polarizing conversations. So this could be taking an assessment, taking a survey, to really get a gauge of how your organization is doing in this area. There might be policies that could be developed, like thinking about the communication one that we talked about, or even just setting that expectation, right? That the norm will be to lead with curiosity and not judgment, amongst your team, amongst your organization. Another way to take action is, providing training in a subject like conflict management and problem solving. Um, Part of the reason that conflict escalates is, sometimes we haven't been trained on how to deal with it, or it's been unaddressed. Um, as we have seen, the discomfort around having these polarizing conversations. So it could be important to have some type of training or seeing it modeled, through leadership or things of that nature. So I think even a training could be important. Another action step could be, really supporting employees that do express concerns, because some challenges left unaddressed can turn into larger problems. So, again, whether you're just an advocate or you're in leadership or you kind of manage areas such as these, really being able to support employees that do come with different concerns and things of that nature. And the last piece is just regularly reviewing and updating, your organizational efforts. Again, things change when it comes to just handling polarizing conversations or just thinking about, okay, how can we continue to be on the radar and take action when it comes to navigating these polarizing conversations. Ultimately, it's important to know your organization's values and mission, so that navigating these polarizing conversations can lead you all in the right direction. So as we come to a close, I would love for you all to share any insights or questions that you might have, or anything that you might want to implement into the workplace or even your personal lives. Just want to get an idea of, yeah, any questions or any of these strategies that you might have used, or just want to leave some time for that. Um, whether that's in the chat or in the Q&A. I can also go into that as well. Okay, any thoughts behind, navigating these polarizing conversations, or even if you feel compelled to, try to start the conversation, yeah, be monitoring. Yeah, either the Q&A or the chat works as well. Just wanted to get some time for that if anyone has anything. So you all are still thinking. Just want to provide again some key takeaways from today. I think that this is important to lead with empathy and curiosity as you're navigating these polarizing conversations in the workplace. Promoting the idea of respectful disagreement. The goal of all this is not to, change people's minds or having to agree on everything, but you know, how does it look like to just have that respectful disagreement and being able to create a space with people that may think different and having that be okay as you navigate those conversations and ultimately creating that inclusive workplace culture. So that's thinking about how we can respectfully um, embrace embrace all thoughts and trying to come to just some sort of civility, right? Because we are in a very polarizing time, and it's very important to just get some sort of cohesion when we think about navigating these polarizing conversations. So I wanted to take some time to highlight just some of our DEI offerings brought to you by our new website. We have our DEI Workplace Essential Certificate, our Inclusive Leader Certificate, and soon to come will be our DEI Workplace Influencer Certificate. We've added the link to this website, or I'll add that link into the chat now, just of our website. See if I can get to it really quickly. And then this has a lot of our different offerings and different resources as well. So I'm just going to quickly drop that information into the chat. Just bear with me really quick. Let's get back to my. Okay. So let's put that into the chat. And then it has my contact information as well. I just wanted to share. So what's next? On March 19th, 2025, the next expert insights will be on DEI now what? As we see, a lot of the recent pushback. Um, the point of this webinar, or for the next webinar, is just really providing that spark of hope that DEI values still have a role in shaping our workplaces and communities and nations. And um, we'll have a great conversation on just what that resilience looks like and how we can continue to still understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. So again, just wanted to thank you all for this time, and I'll be hanging out as well if anyone had additional questions or wanted to utilize that Q&A or the chat just so that we can so that I can still continue to engage. So I know it's during the lunch hour, so feel free to get back to your lunch or to ask any questions or any insights. We'd love to hear. Just maybe one thing that you all hope to take back, or one thing that um, or something that you want to continue to do. Would love to see that within the chat if you have the time. But otherwise, if you are wanting to depart, then I appreciate you all coming to today's expert insights as well. Okay. So there's a question. It says, how would you handle sort of passive disagreement, said in passing to other employees? Should you handle it passively or create more space for them? So that's a great question. I think in terms of um, passive disagreement, I think for that aspect, depending on, if it's something that passive disagreement was something within that moment, I think being able to have that curiosity or leading with that curiosity to asking them to explain further. So I think definitely still addressing it just in a way of understanding. Um, so thank you for that question as well.